Ever wondered what it takes to make, market, and distribute skincare products that really deliver? Well, we've been at it for over 5 years, and we can't stop talking about it. Join us today as we separate the facts from the fads with today's guest, Dr. Steve Ship. This is episode 4 of Big Derm Energy, and today we're talking about one of the most common skin concerns, oily skin. Welcome, Steve.
Great to be here.
Finally getting into some of the topics that I think our audience really wants to hear about. This is the first time we're going to be talking about any of our skin concerns. And, one of the primary reasons is we have a brand new collection of products, Clear System, that's coming out this month and then launching into Target next month. So this will be part of a series focused in on acne and acne related concerns. So thanks for joining us and sharing all of the tips that you have for us.
Yeah, I'd love to be here and love to share some thoughts.
I think, in our past, Steve, this was probably oily skin was one of the most interesting conversations we've ever had on our Friday calls. I think that like all of us, really learned a lot about, what causes it, things like what is sebum and also just like how much skincare plays a role, in the oily skin concern. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about like what is oily skin? What is sebum? Just give everyone just like a little background on kind of like this specific concern, why it's so common with acne.
Yeah, it's super common, right? So basically, we all have something called sebaceous glands in our skin. Men have it, women have it, kids have it, right? And something kind of happens that's interesting for adolescence, which is puberty, right? And in that sort of setting, you have profound changes to sort of hormones, right? Hormone levels, etc. And that sort of hormonal change leads to sort of like activation of these sebaceous glands, right? That's where acne starts appearing in those teenage years because you're going through a lot of changes, and your skin is no different, right? So the hormones trigger your sebaceous glands to produce something called sebum. Okay, what sebum is it's basically oil and fats, right? It's basically what naturally moisturizes your skin. But when it goes to overdrive or there's too much, which happens a lot, right, during your adolescent years, that's what causes acne. It can build up, it can clog pores, it becomes something that is food for bacteria, it can create odors, these kind of things. So that's what then creates oily skin, right? And oily skin can then drive as one component of acne development. And it's not something that's just in the teenage years. So for males and adults, like we still can produce a lot of sebum, right? Depending on your genetics and environmental. And so you can have acne well after your teenage years. For women, a lot of it is hormonally driven after the teenage years, like when it comes around the menstrual cycle, when you have a surge of hormone release, etc. So basically, headline is we all have sebaceous glands all over our bodies, our face, etc. When we go through puberty, the hormones drive increased production of sebum, which is essentially oils, fats, etc., that your body naturally produces, and that can clog pores, lead to acne and oily skin.
Interesting. You answered a whole bunch of my questions all in that one, that one answer. So, you hear all the time that guys have bigger pores, bigger plants. Oily skin seems to be a larger problem with guys, or potentially, as you mentioned, females with hormonal acne. So, can you tell me a little bit? Is this true? Do guys have larger glands? Does this cause more oily skin in guys typically?
Well, I mean, acne is like pretty darn common in both men and women, pretty like consistently, right? It's not like more men get acne. It's just super common in both, you know, females and males, right? Um, I would sort of say that there's still a lot of variation within gender as it is differences between the different genders, right? So you just might have, the genetics where your dad just was very oily, had a lot of severe acne for a longer period of time in life, and you just go kind of dealt those cards, right? And I think the main difference for adults between men and women is I see more women having hormonally driven acne, right? And for men, because androgen, which is the male hormone, is sort of produced all the time. We don't have a menstrual cycle as men, right? And so there's maybe sort of a more consistent acne issue if you're a man with those genetics, et cetera, in terms of like always having oily skin. And for women, a flare up during the menstrual cycle is a little bit more common
Uh,
after the teenage years. Men are just bigger, right? So like if you were to measure each gland, it's probably bigger, right, than a woman's. But like in general, it's not necessarily that different, right? The number of glands that you have, that's pretty consistent across, people. But it is like how active they are, how do they respond to hormones and your environment, et cetera, right? So, if you're a place that's super dry, right, arid, right, not humid, et cetera, you just might get less of this issue, right? Just because it's more dry out there than
uh,
if you were in somewhere that was, moist or sweaty, et cetera. So like you could be completely the same person, not have a problem if you're in a certain environment and have a problem in a different environment. That's another sort of factor that we should also consider.
Interesting. So even summer and winter in certain, climates could certainly affect this.
But
So I mean, it's a great explanation. And it sounds like, as you age from adolescence to becoming older, and potentially depending on the different type of why you have the oily skin, are there different solutions to fixing oily skin, or is it kind of like one common thing to fix this? And what are kind of like the benefits of focusing on oily skin versus maybe just on acne treatment, for instance?
yeah, I mean, you can have oily skin and no acne, right? Like that could be sort of, that's your perspective and your sort of, lived experience. I think it's hard to have acne without, oil production, right? Because that is one of the drivers of acne. Although there's other forms of acne, but typically, that comes hand in hand, right? It's necessary but not sufficient, right? And I think that ultimately the challenge with managing oily skin, if you have acne, you want to treat it, like going after the oil is one important factor. It's not comprehensive. You do other things too, but reducing the oil production is a key component of successful acne management, right? And you can do that a number of different ways, right? Cleansers, right? Alpha hydroxy acids like glycolic acid or beta hydroxyalides like salicylic acid. Those cleansers are everywhere. They're available. They're effective, right? Retinol is another one, right? That does reduce oil production, right? Sort of decreases the activity of the sebaceous glands. That's really important as well. So those are kind of ways you can attack, oil production, right? Is to, use cleansers and retinols. I think the other side of it is that, oil has benefits too, right? Your body's producing it not because it wants you to get acne, but part of it is to keep your skin hydrated, right? Keep it moisturized, like prevent, dry, flaky, itchy skin, atopic dermatitis, etc. So, there's this balance, Stephen, of cleansing without stripping away too much and staying hydrated. So I think that's always sort of like a challenge for some of my patients to find that right, Goldilocks solution.
Interesting. I think it's like very similar to, the oils that your hair produces. Maybe not my hair, right? But your hair. And definitely, our females that have longer hair as well. And, one thing I know we talk about a lot is how you kind of have to like train your scalp, train your hair, right? In terms of oil production. Same thing with like when you start using a natural deodorant, right? You kind of are training your body to almost react differently. Is it similar with oily skin on your face and hydrating and cleansing? Do you kind of get into a schedule or routine, Steve, that like trains the oil production almost as you cleanse and like find a routine that's best for your skin to improve it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't use the term training. I think there's definitely adaptation, right, of
Okay.
your skin to external factors, right, that you're doing, right? Obviously, with retinol, when you first started, like, and that's why I'm really proud of how at Geology we have sort of a regimented increase in strength. When you have skin that's naive or hasn't been subjected, right, to an active like retinol, it's going to react a little bit more aggressively. You're going to be drier, redder, or more irritated just because your skin is not used to that, right? But as it sort of normalizes, there are, DNA changes, right, in your skin cells that kind of adapt to its new normal, right, and find sort of an equilibrium, right? And so I think that's why, understanding that's important, right? so that, it finds that right medium of, reducing the oil production without getting dry and flaky. And so when you first start like an active like retinol at night, I have to tell my patients, skip every other night, use a smaller amount until you begin to tolerate it over 2 to 4 to 6 or even 12 weeks. And then once you reach that stable point, you're going to be in a point where you're kind of in that, what we call therapeutic window, right? Not too high where it's side effects and not too low where you see no benefit, right? And that just requires a little bit of time and adaptation.
So it sounds like there's really like a combination of tips that you're giving here. Um, it's cleansing, and we got one question from someone in our audience, and they asked, "Does double cleansing help? How many times a day should you be cleansing? Does it depend on how oily your skin is and other factors?"
Yeah, I think it depends, right? I think that, you know, once a day might work for most people, maybe up to twice a day, right? Nighttime and evening time, right? I think more than that, first of all, it's just inconvenient, right? Like you got to like remember that and, lunchtime. Like I just think that ultimately there's sort of that convenience factor, but also, you run a higher risk of just increased irritancy, right? And so like, I think that ultimately it's not always just like you just cleanse more to get reduce of oily skin. It's kind of like that's one mechanism, right? Using cleansers, but then adding a retinol too, just kind of looks at it from a different angle, right? To kind of address different things.
Mhm.
Because with the cleanser, you're kind of just getting rid of that oil that's produced. With the retinol, you're kind of affecting how much oil is made, right, by the glands themselves. So I think it's just sort of important to have it attacked on both fronts. So you're not just stripping away skin with cleansers 4 or 5 times a day. I think that's too much. So I think that's kind of the take home is that it's not always like one strategy a lot, right? That doesn't always yield the best results.
Okay, and during the day, would you recommend just like a moisturizer? I mean, we've heard also these myths that, you can't use SPF if you have oily skin. And of course, we always recommend that everyone uses SPF. So how do you ensure during the day that you're getting the moisture your skin needs to help with oily skin and still ensure that you're using, an SPF as well?
Yeah. I mean, that's like a myth, right? Like ultimately, like if you have oily skin, that doesn't mean you can't use sunscreen, right? You can get sunburn. Like sebum doesn't protect you from ultraviolet radiation, right? And so you want to look for moisturizers that are thinner, right? Non-comedogenic is maybe the term you want to look for. And I think that's important so that when you do moisturize, which is still important, and you have an SPF, right? It's non-comedogenic, so it doesn't like worsen or increase the risk of acne. Yeah.
Interesting. So during the day, use a moisturizer. I guess you could use a retinol cream during the day as well, right? If you have particularly oily skin, you can use a retinol night cream day and night after washing your face.
You could. I mean, typically I recommend retinols only at night because UV radiation deactivates it, right? But I mean, if the UV index is low and you're in Chicago in January, right? Using a retinol in the morning, could help, right? But I think typically retinols have that like longer acting over the skin. So, doing it twice a day is not going to be as, beneficial, right? Cleansers are only going to work kind of that moment you're using it, right? So that's why, if you have extra problems with it, twice a day might be what you need, and then a retinol at night.
Interesting. So we hear from a lot of people that they have an oily T zone. What exactly does that mean? Why do we get more oily a lot of times, like in this region of the face in particular? And is there, if you have mixed skin types, like where you have dry skin in certain areas and oily skin in other areas, what do you recommend?
So this is an interesting area, right? Sort of like hair bearing with the eyebrows. So you have a lot of activity with the sebaceous glands, right? It's also an area where the hair can trap that as well. It's a little bit harder to clean. The kind of nose nasal labial folds is the medical term, right? There's sort of like some areas of occlusion and skin folds where there can be a concentration of it. Funny fact, there's actually a tribe in Africa that uses the sebum here with sticks to start fires, right? That's sort of like an area of high concentration of oils and these kind of things. So it's not uncommon. It's sort of like, evolutionarily conserved, right? To have sort of this area being extra high in oil and this kind of stuff. So it's part of the skin folds, higher density, right? Hair bearing areas. combo skin is very common, right? Certain areas where it may be extra oily, but then the cheeks are very dry or the forehead's very dry. You just gotta, be cognizant of that, right? There's certain cleansers that are gels or creams, not a wash, so you can be a little bit more targeted, right? That's kind of one thing. With retinols, you can also be a little bit more targeted, right? Just to kind of watch that, and you want to maybe moisturize more carefully on the areas that are dry. So it just takes a little bit of extra effort to put, the products where they need to go.
And is it similar with body acne? Is it still sebaceous glands that are producing oil, and kind of like a similar thing with your body in terms of trying to solve for oily skin?
Yes, I mean like back acne or back knee, right? The chest area, right? That's another common area is oil. So like men with hair here, right? That's also like an
Okay.
area. So those areas are a little bit tougher actually to treat with acne because just the skin is thicker. It's just a little bit hard to penetrate with certain materials. Hard to get coverage over your back, right? Just because of certain areas you can't reach. So that's definitely a problem, right? I think that's where things like body washes are the kind of things can be helpful, right? As you're sort of like thinking about that. One tip is that if you have a body wash or you have something that's sort of, designed to be put on and then rinsed off, putting it on and letting it sit for like 3-5 minutes, like sing a song in the shower before rinsing it off can actually make a big difference in benefit.
What song should you sing, Steve? What song would you sing?
I mean, that Mariah Carey song, All I Want for Christmas Is You, right? I think that's a good one in the holiday season, right? That's always a winner.
All
About the
right.
right
We're gonna
length.
put it. We're gonna put it in our how-to instructions for the new body wash.
Make
Um,
sure you license though.
yeah. Um, so you said to leave, the body wash on, or even a face wash, maybe for a period of time. Does it matter what ingredients? I mean, I know our face wash has salicylic acid. Our body
Yeah.
wash has glycolic acid. Is there a difference between AHA and BHA as they treat oily skin and exfoliating glands? And we also have lactic acid. What is that?
I mean, they're all acids, right? Basically, right? And so they're basically acidic, kind of, chemicals, materials, products, right? That are used to kind of break up debris and oil, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm sure people have done head-to-head studies of alpha hydroxy acids versus beta hydroxy acids. At the end of the day, there's so many other factors, right? Concentration, vehicle, right? So I would say they're different, but without too much distinction, right? It's just like they're all going to probably work the same, right? And ultimately, what you like, what you enjoy, what your skin will tolerate is probably the right thing. We select, the different types just depending on what's most likely to kind of work uh, better, right, for your body type, etc. I think glycolic acid can just be a little harsher. Of course, it depends on the percentage, right? That's really kind of a key thing. Um, and the vehicle, but ultimately something a little bit stronger for the body is a good sort of step. So I would say glycolic acid might have the reputation for being a little bit more aggressive in its anti-oil, right? But there's a lot of factors that contribute to the ultimate result.
Interesting. So I have some acne. I'm a young adolescent. I have fairly oily skin, and I'm just getting started, right, with some products and a routine to help with this. What does it look like short term? Tell me a little bit about starting the routine, some of the effects you see, starting with a retinol. How long does it take to actually see some improvement in oily skin and then start to see reduction, in acne? What does that look like for someone just getting into a new routine?
You got to always give it at least a month. Maximum benefits 3 months. You're going to first notice side effects where your acne gets better. No pain, no gain, no victory without sacrifice, right? So you're going to feel a little dry, a little red. I mean, that means it's working, right? If you want something that
Yeah.
doesn't cause anything, then just a moisturizer, that's not going to, help your acne that much, right? So I think that's going to be the first thing you notice, but then your body will start tolerating it, right? I think we do a good job of graduating you up to the right strength. But that first, month, after a month, you'll just see, I think, a little bit of benefit, right? You'll kind of get past the first 2 weeks of side effects. 2 months, you get little, even more better. 3, you'll see some real results. That's a consistent usage over 6 months. You should, be in a much better spot, right? And that requires consistent use. I see a lot of teenagers that, they start feeling good, looking good at 4 months. They stop. They think they're cured. comes back, right? And then you set yourself behind again. Your skin then needs to get retolerated. So I think, you got to wait and see. Most people do grow out of acne, right? Their sort of hormones are stabilized. They go through adolescence. Not everybody, right? Acne is still very common in adults, etc. But, this is sort of a year thing, right? Several years, right? You don't have acne for 3 months and it goes away for you, right? We can all remember our high school years, right? This is kind of a year or two thing until, it gets better.
Hmm. And we do get some inquiries around retinol burn, sometimes also just around allergies. Is there, as you're getting into this toleration period, how can you tell the difference? What is your advice for someone who maybe their acne is getting worse, their skin is getting dry, they are getting a little irritated? How do you know that's normal versus potentially like, oh, there might be something within this that my skin is actually not going to tolerate long term?
Well, it's a good question because sometimes they're very hard to distinguish, right? So I think retinol burns, it's a very severe reaction. Almost most, if not the majority of over the counter stuff is just not at a degree of severity and strength, right, to cause a retinol burn, although it does happen. Those are usually like the big heavy hitter prescription, you know,
Yeah.
things that we usually educate our patients to use a very small amount, take your time, go every other day, use a moisturizer. So I think a retinol burn is like really stark red, doesn't feel better with moisturizer after several days, like it's just something that, is painful, right? I think retinol irritation is painful, but I think that's kind of a little different. So it's just more severity. And the fact if you're using over the counter, it's just unlikely just because they're not as strong as the prescription, right? I think developing a skin allergy in like 1 week or 2 weeks is really rare, right? That usually takes months and months of exposure, and usually it's more itchy and flaky. Like itch is more common than pain or burn, right? And if you get that, it's more likely due to a fragrance, right? Not the retinol itself, right? That's what you're really allergic to, not the retinol. So, I would say like you should expect some redness irritation over 2 or 3 weeks. It should be self-resolving, right? Moisturizer will help. I think if it lasts longer than that, more pain or more itch, then yeah, let your dermatologist know.
Great. It's a great response. I think, Steve, you answered just about everything that I wanted to learn about, oily skin, how to treat it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to just add around the routine ingredients?
No, I think look, I think oily skin is multifactorial, it's complicated, right? You want to get the oil already produced, that's a great cleanser, right? I think we've got a great one at Geology, salicylic acid for the face, just because it's a little bit gentler, and I think we've got a great product there. And then, glycolic acid if you're dealing with it on the body, right?
Mhm.
Retinol is great to sort of do a long-term solution where you're really affecting the production of that sebum. So hitting it from both ends, I think, is really important. And having an SPF with a moisturizer, right, really helps with soothing without worsening the acne, right? So, you know, there's a trade-off between getting rid of the oil and being dry, right? So I think that's sort of like that thing where maybe you're a once a day, once a night person, maybe you're twice, once in the morning, once at night, once at night. So I think it just kind of depends. And then maybe with seasonality, that will change as well, right? Hot and sweaty in the summer, you might need a little bit more oil control, right? So that's kind of a part of it. And if you're a woman, right, maybe this is more intense in the week or so before your menstrual period, right? These are kind of just things that you have to think about. There's no sort of silver bullet. You got to kind of titrate to your body.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You know, it's the same routine, but you potentially have to apply things a little bit differently during those different times to make sure that your skin is adjusting properly. So, um, well, thanks for joining and talking to me about oily skin. I learned a lot more today than even last time we talked about this, on our Friday calls. And hopefully, this is a good topic for our audience to listen in on and learn, because one way to certainly improve upon your acne is to, focus in on the oily skin concern, as you said. So, thanks so much, and look forward to our next conversation.
Great. Great being here.